This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so a very quick recap of what we've been doing out here is that we said firstly what a resource group is, and then we said what a storage account really is. And we said storage account is a specialist in storing data which is in unstructured in nature. And then we said how do you store data in it using a service known as a container. Then how do you share this data, or how do you share this data something like over the internet, like using something like connection, I mean using something known as a URL along with something known as shared access signature and etc. This is how you could share the data over the internet and etc. Right, at the same time we also said okay fine, storage account is not only limited to just storing the data. We also have a service known as an Azure static website, and the Azure static website implements something known as, let's say, a dollar web container. And inside that dollar web container you can upload your files like JS, HTML, whichever is your static content, and you can put it in there so that you can host your websites even from the Azure storage services out there. And we said that there are different pricing tiers out here, and we said what how do you calculate the price, and the website here is called price.azure.com, where you can go there and you can do a pricing calculator as such, or you can give a pricing calculator as such. Right, are we good till here, guys? Any questions still here that I can take? And guys online, I'll request you to please go on mute if you do not have any questions. So now let's take a use case scenario out here. Let's say how do businesses use something like a storage service? Okay, so let's imagine that you are a website, like a search engine. Okay, you are like a search engine out here, like google.com. So let's say you are a website out here like google.com out here, google.com, and you finally one day come to google.com and you want to search for, let's say, images of cars or images of dogs or whatever it is, whatever that you want to do a search out. So I, as a user, I am, let's say, from a region like India. Okay, so I, as a user, is coming from India, and I am going to a website known as google.com. So I'm coming here all the way from India and I'm going to a website known as google.com and I'm doing a search. I'm just typing in images and I get back the images. Now Google has to have some kind of a backend storage to store all these images, right? In our case, let's imagine that Google is using the storage account service. Google is hosting all their images inside a Microsoft service known as an Azure storage account. So let's take the image of a storage account and let's say this is our backend storage. So all the images, okay, are stored in the backend storage in the form of containers. So I'm just talking about images, no videos, nothing. So just a simple Google website search, which has all the images and etc. So you have a Google search, you have images out here, and when the user comes in and types in cars or images or something like that, the search query is back and running with a program. That program goes into the storage account, and based upon the search query, gives you a list of images out there. So what exactly happens out here is that whenever you do a Google search, right, your browser will download all those images. Like that's what it is. It'll download all these images and it'll tell you, okay, fine, this is the page that you have. Now you can go ahead, you can see the image or download the image or save the image, whatever you want to do with that, right? Let's imagine that this storage account, now this is a backend storage account, right? This is in a location, like it's technically in a location, right? Meaning this is hosted out of a server that is in the backend, like that's sitting in some kind of a data center somewhere in a location like East US2 or whichever region that you selected. So let's imagine my storage account right now is sitting in East US2, and there is one request that is coming from India. So what's happening right now is that I am basically requesting to a server called google.com. Google.com internally is going and hitting the storage account out here, and it's taking all the images from this particular storage account, again coming back to this particular server, and then returning me the image. So this entire journey that I'm taking, right, from my location, now this is called POP, point of presence, meaning I as a user is now coming from a location like India, going to the server, and that server is again going to that storage account. Storage account is again coming back to the server, again that particular server is returning me the image. This entire journey that I'm taking is known as latency. Latency, right? Meaning the time for me to just type in something called images for cars, and the time for which Google takes Google takes to return those particular images out there. Okay, this entire journey is known as now called what? Latency. Now let's imagine that, or we all know that Google is not, let's say, a regional website, it's a global website, right? Google is a global website, meaning not only people from India but people from all over the world visit the google.com. So here, let's say there are different people coming from different parts of the world. So we have like different customers coming from different parts of the world to Google out here, and let's say Africa, let's say Europe, and let's say US. So I'm just representing customers who are coming from different parts of the world out here. Now let's technically imagine this out. Okay. Now as a user from India, okay, just give me one quick second out here, guys. Okay, sorry for that. Okay. So as a user from India, let's imagine that I am taking somewhere around 3 seconds, meaning my latency is around 3 seconds, meaning the difference between, let's say I go to google.com and for me to get the image, it's about 3 seconds, because I am doing every day 1,000-mile journey from my point to the point of server, and then the server is responding back to me. Let's say again Africa. Let's imagine that this particular continent doesn't have a great internet connection. Again, it depends upon the internet connection that you have. So let's say this is 5 seconds. Any user who's coming from a continent like Africa is taking about 5 seconds. Europe, good internet connection, and also very one important thing is that proximity to the server, meaning the distance, the actual distance between the user and the server out here is also something that I'm calculating, right? So Europe is closer to US, agreed. Geographically, it is close. Also, the internet connections are good because it's a developed nation or it's a developed continent out there. So let's say the time is 1 second out here. Now, what can be the time? Let's say for a person who's coming from US, less than 1 second, because he's sitting in the same country and he's got a great internet connection. So this is something like milliseconds out here. Now, in this model, I have one particular issue out here. Now, me from India, I am paying the same amount for, let's say, the Azure storage. Someone from Africa is also paying the same amount. Someone from Europe is also paying the same amount. US is also paying the same amount. But the customer treatment is different depending upon your internet speed and depending upon the proximity to your to the server. The treatment out here is different, meaning each and every user is not getting the same treatment out here. One issue that I have with this particular model. The second issue that I have is that now these are not just one request originating for one particular continent. These are millions of requests that are hitting the same server, right? These are millions of requests, not one but millions of requests that are coming and hitting the same server out here. Now, should I not think about the case where my server can crash because about the number of requests that I'm actually looking at out here, or let's say in millions, right? Or let's say in something like millions out here. So there is an issue out here that the maintenance cost in the backend, though it is taken care by Azure, the amount of data availability, or let's say the maintenance that I'm putting on top of that server, is actually higher in this particular model, because I just have one server and I have, let's say, multiple users just hitting that particular same server. So there is an issue, or there is basically some kind of an issue that my server can crash at some point in time. So my maintenance cost kind of increases. So it is neither profitable for the business nor advantageous, or nor advantageous for the user also. Like both the way, I have an issue. Neither the customer is happy, neither the business is happy. Both the way, I have an issue out here. Now then, can anyone suggest what can be a better way to kind of remodel this structure out? Can anyone suggest this out? Okay, but let's not go into load balancing as such. Like there is a service known as load balancer, yes, but not really. Load balancer is something that I'm not really looking for. Like something in a very basic idea. Establish data centers, or rather, just to put it in another way, you say create multiple storage accounts, each storage account for one continent, right? So let's say I am putting something like this. So one storage account for a continent, something like this, like four different storage accounts. But again, what is the cost of one storage account? It's about 11,000 rupees per a month if I'm creating an LRS. If it is four, it is 11,000 into four directly, right? Then the business says that, you know what, I cannot really give you some that amount of budget. That we do not have that amount of budget right now. We only have budget for one particular storage account out here. Now, this is where a concept called CDN comes into picture. CDN is an acronym for Content Delivery Network. What content delivery networks are really is that, let's reimagine this business slightly a bit, okay? Let's again put a storage account out here. Now, this is a storage account that is serving as a central server for the entire google.com. It's in a location called East US 2. And right now, what I'm doing is that instead of creating each and every, or instead of creating one storage account per a continent, I am saying that I have a concept known as something. Okay, I have a concept known as something called CDNs. Let's see if I have a diagram for that. There's a CDN. Yes, I have a concept known as CDNs, or these are also known as edge servers. Okay, they're also known as edge servers out here. So what I'm doing right now is that these are temporary servers, not costlier, very expendable, very cheap. So what I'll do is I'll place multiple servers across the world. I'll place multiple servers across the world. And what I will do right now is that I'll connect these servers to my storage account. I'll connect all these servers to my storage account out here. Now let's imagine what happens out here is that now there are four different continents, four different users out here. Again, let's talk about our users out here. Now what happens out here in this model is that, let's imagine that this user is doing a Google search for the first time, like the very first time in his life. And let's imagine that this user is the first user from a country like Africa who's doing the Google search for the first time, very first time. Okay. This user, for the very first time, will take this route. He will directly go to the server, like any other user does without the CDN concept, like we were doing without the CDN concept. This user will directly go to this particular server. That server will give him the image, but this time the image giving is not a straight point, but the image goes into something known as the edge server. Now what happens is that all these images are cached. There's a very important concept known as cache, meaning storing all these images or saving all these images for a temporary period of time into this particular server out here. This is now known as what? edge server. Now the second request from a second user, if the second user is coming from a continent like Africa, this user will now not go all the way to ECS2, but he will just go to this particular server known as the edge server, and the request will come back. Now what's happening out here is that I am now able to reduce the time for, or the latency time, from 5 seconds to less than a millisecond. The issue that I had, A, is that the user were facing different, different timing, load times, etc. I'm addressing that. Second is that not all the requests are now hitting my central server, or not all the requests are hitting my central storage account. This is now reducing my maintenance cost. This is now a two-way advantage. This concept is known as a hub and spoke model. Like this is a hub and all these are spokes. Like it's coming from the cycle term where you have a central hub and all the spokes coming out from there. This is also known as a hub and spoke model, but popularly called as CDNs or edge servers out here. Okay. Now this is the concept that what we are trying to achieve in this class. So we'll do a demo now, right now, to see what is the advantage of this model and etc. We'll see how to create services and etc. out there. But before we get into the demo, guys, any questions with this particular theory out here? I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I did not follow that question. Sorry. What? Okay. Not sure about that. Any more questions here, guys? Online, offline.
Uh,
Mhm.
Kiran, I have a query. Uh, Previously, in our earlier classes, while we were creating the tags or while we were adding the contributors and readers to our
Mhm.
admin ID, we
Okay.
used mail IDs there to add the
Right.
users.
Right.
Right? Instead of using the mail IDs, can we not use the usernames there?
Like in the addition of, I mean, in the addition of the airbags and etc.
Yes.
So you can add users by username also, provided the user is already
Mhm.
existing in your Active Directory.
Okay. Okay. If it is a
Since the
new
user,
user, then we require a
it
mail
has to
ID.
be a mail ID.
Correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Kiran.
Okay. So any specific
Yeah,
questions with this, guys? With yeah.
yeah, Kiran, Hatif here. What are
Mhm.
CDNs?
So CDNs again are nothing but servers. They are like something known as temporary servers or makeshift servers, or the
Mm-hmm.
full form is content delivery network out here. So what it
Okay,
does
content
is that
delivery.
it accelerates the rate at which you give the content out to the user. That's what CDN really does out here.
Okay,
So it's a
content delivery
static
network,
content
right?
delivery acceleration. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, content delivery networks.
Correct. Content delivery networks.
Okay,
Mhm.
it will accelerate the speed of the searching.
Can you give me one quick second out here?
Sure.
Yeah. Yes, it does need hardware. So you're renting out again. So Microsoft now is renting out servers from different providers. This is cost effective. So it is not like, you do not have to pay the amount that you pay when you create a storage account. When you create a storage account, it's somewhere around 11,000 rupees per month. When you do an edge server, it's somewhere around 1,000, 1,500 per month. So you're reducing the cost that way. So instead of like 11,000 into 4, you have 111,000 plus 4 into 1,500, which is cost effective. So yes, great question. So who actually maintains these things is that they are providers for it. So just like we have mobile carrier providers, right? They are providers for it, and Microsoft relies upon providers like Verizon, who's one of the provider for these particular servers in countries like or in continents like Europe and US. So Verizon provides this out in Europe, and when you go for Far East like Japan and etc., there is a company called Akamai. It's a mobile carrier company. That company gives you these servers, and Microsoft also has its own servers. So there are three options that you see out here, like Verizon, Akamai, or standard Microsoft. So you can select any one of them based upon which Microsoft is going to provision you the servers, or you have Verizon, or you have a different company who's like giving these servers out here. And then that company maintains it out. Microsoft pays for that particular company out there. Hmm. Yes. Yeah, they will have all these features. Like they'll just have to onboard, or just they'll just have to sign up into the Azure portal. So once they sign up into the Azure portal, they'll be able to take all these benefits. Right. Correct. Right. They will definitely, but at the same time, the security, the networking, everything is managed by the Microsoft itself. So they don't have to worry about the security and etc. Okay. So let's do a demo out here. So I'll just create a resource group. Firstly, to start with, I'll just create one particular resource group out here called demo RG. And as and when I create a resource group, I'll go into this resource group and I'll add a service known as a storage account. So let's give it a second and let's go ahead and say storage account out here. So let me create one quick storage account out here. Like, yes, I know that this is taken. It's easiest to. And let's say this is LRS. So I'm just creating a very simple basic storage account. So no advanced, nothing. I'm just going ahead and saying review and create out here. So very simple storage service out here. And once the storage account is created, what I'll do is that I'll just go ahead and create a container out here. And I'll just upload a couple of files inside this container. And we'll try to browse these files firstly without the concept known as edge servers. We'll just without implementing a concept known as CDNs or edge servers, we'll just see what is the time it takes to load these files and etc. Okay, and the files that I'm uploading are about 4 MB 3 MB files or stuff like that. Okay, so once the storage account is provisioned, let me go inside the storage account and let me go ahead and create something known as a container out here. So I'm saying test container, like a very simple test container out here. And now I'll just give this container in a container access level because I'm imagining or I'm assuming that this is a public website. It should be accessible publicly out here. I'll say container, create this out. And once I go inside this container, let me go ahead and upload a couple of files. So let's see. I have a couple of files. I'm just taking all these files out here and I'm just uploading all these things at one go. So about 4 MB files, 3 MB files, and etc. This is the file size that I'm uploading out. And once these are uploaded, let me just close this out, give it a refresh, and just pick up the biggest file here, which is like 4.7 MB. I'm just taking the URL of this file and I'm using an incognito browsing out here so that my browser cache doesn't affect this. It'll give me what is the actual speed that for which with what it's taking to load out here. So I'm just putting the file name, I'm just putting the file URL in my browser, and before I load this file I want to see what is the time for which it takes. I can either count this physically, but I don't want to do that. It will give me a lot of errors that way. So what I'll do right now is that I will load something known as a developer tool on my browser. Now there is something known as a developer tool every browser comes with, which will tell you what are the errors and what is the load time it is taking and etc. In order to load them, what I'll do is that I'll just simply type in F12. I'll just simply type in F12 out here and this tool comes up. Okay, like in any of your browsers, in my system it was function F12. If I typed in function F12, this comes in In your browser, it can just be F12. Okay. So I just typed in F12 and this screen loaded out here. Okay. So what I'll do right now with the screen open, I'll just say enter. And here, right, it's still loading the image. If you see on the left hand side, it's still loading the image. It's taking a lot of time to load this image out here. And this is the time it is taking out here. And the image is loaded. And right now the time was around 19.37 seconds. This is the amount of time it took to load the entire image. Like it gave me firstly the small display of the image, but to load the entire configuration, meaning the entire amount of image out here, depending upon the internet connection, I got somewhere around 19.37 seconds out here. Let's do one thing. I'll reload this image again. And this time when I reload it, it might take far amount of lesser time than what it was doing earlier. Now, do you see now it's taking somewhere around what? 8 seconds. Why? It's because when I loaded the image the first time, my browser cached the image, meaning my browser saved the image into something known as a cache data. So every browser will have something known as a cache out here, right? So if you do, let's say if I do right now, if I go ahead and do a control H, which will give me my history. So got it? Okay, fine. Meaning it's saying you're an incognito. That's the reason you're not loading history and everything. Okay. This is what I'm trying to say. If I do a control H out here in the normal browser, and if I just clear my browsing data, right? If I just do this, it says cached images and files, right? This is the option that I'm looking at. Cached images and files, I have around 319 MB of cached images. Meaning, whenever I went to a site like facebook.com or whenever I search for something, all these images got cached in my browser. That's the reason the next time I load, right, it's taking much more faster time than the first time. Now, if there are no CDNs, if there are no concept known as a CDN, each and every user from India has to load that particular request, has to load that into his browser, cache it in his browser to enjoy the reduced time. But what I'll do right now is that to make things easier, to make sure that I take advantage of a concept known as CDNs out here, I'll just come here and I'll type CDN. Okay. I'm creating something known as a CDN profile. In the search window, I'm saying it's a CDN profile. I'll say CDN profile out here. I'll say create. So I am creating a CDN, also known as an H server out here. And here it's telling me, okay, fine, there are a couple of options. I'll select demo RG. And one very important thing, guys, out here is that when we were creating a storage account, it was asking for a location, right? It said which location do you want to create this out. CDNs doesn't have a location. They are global resource because they have to be created globally. Depending upon the user request, they'll be created globally across. So that's the reason it's not asking you for a region out here. So there is no region. It's just telling the resource group region is East US. This is what it is telling out here. And now I'll say the profile details and I'll say the name of the profile is something like SCDN profile ABC, like something to get started with. And now it's telling the region is now global. There is no option for me to go ahead and select a particular region out here because that's how the resource should be out here. And this is what the pricing tier comes into picture. When you ask the question that, what are the providers? This is where the providers are. Now you have different providers out here like standard Microsoft, standard Verizon, standard Akamai, and premium Verizon. Each and everything has its own features. We'll discuss about that. But in my case, to make sure that the cost is simplified and to make sure that I am sticking close with the free trial subscription, because in a free trial subscription, you'll only have an option to go ahead for standard Microsoft. Okay, so I'm just going for a standard Microsoft out here, and I'll say tags. So very simple creation. No, I'm not tagging the resource, reviewing and creating this out. So I'm just giving details like the resource group, the name of the CDN profile, and the pricing tier. I selected something known as the standard Microsoft, and I'm saying create this out. So I am creating the CDN, but I'm not attaching it, or I haven't attached it to the storage account anywhere. So I haven't done that. Let's look at that now. Let's give it a minute to go ahead and create this out. It's going to take less than a minute out here. Now, one quick thing out here is that, guys, when you create this something known as a CDN profile out here, you might get an error telling that the service is not registered. Let's say if you are using something like a free trial subscription, and let's say if you're creating this for the very first time, you might get an error telling that the service is not registered. If you are getting an error something like please register the service and something like that, right? What do is come to your home page, go into the subscriptions, and in my case I have a pay as you go, you will have a free trial. Go here and just type in resource providers. You have something like a resource provider, meaning each and every resource has a provider out here, and just type in CDN. In my case, right, this is registered. For my subscription, the CDN profile is registered. I manually registered this out, like I did not have this option earlier. So in your case, it might be unregistered. So please click on this, and here, right, I have an option to re-register it. You'll have an option to register it. Just click on register. It will take like about 2 minutes, and then it should show this. The status is registered. From unregistered, it should turn the status into registered. If it doesn't, please refresh the screen a couple of times. It will change itself out to registered. And once that's done, you can go ahead and just create something like a CDN profile out here. Okay. So this is for users who are doing it for the first time. It won't be registered. So please go ahead and register this out. So now I have a CDN profile. So it says, okay, fine, this is the demo RG. It's created in something like a demo RG. It's a standard Microsoft. And what I need to do is that in here, right, you have an option known as an endpoint. It's asking you, okay, fine, what is the source data? Meaning, where do you want me to pull all this data from? I will say, please go ahead to a service known as storage account, because storage account is my source data out here. Please go ahead to that particular service and pull all the data. How do I tell it to do that? Is I'll say here, come here, and I'll say add the endpoint. And in the endpoint, I'll say the endpoint name is storage endpoint ABC, something like this. And as and when I do this, right, it's telling me storage endpoint ABC dot Azure Edge .net. This is called as a fully qualified domain name of an edge server. Okay, it's called what? A fully qualified domain name of an edge server out here. And I'll say in the origin type, I'll say it's an Azure storage. You can also go for an Azure static website, meaning you can also accelerate your static content for your website out here. For now, I'm telling it's a storage service, and I'm selecting the storage service. Now, this is my storage service that I created, right? It's healthcare 5, something like this. I'm selecting this out. And now it's telling me what is the origin path, meaning what exactly it's asking here is that, okay, fine, this is your storage service. I understand that until here it's your storage service out here. Let's take this out, and I'll just put this into a notepad. Until here is the storage endpoint, meaning here I'm telling this is the origin host name. I also want to go ahead and tell that please take the content from this particular container known as / containers out here, because that's the only container that I do have. So what I'll do out here is that I'll say the path is / test container. I'm just giving the name of my container out here. I'm saying please go into that particular container and give me whatever data it is, and I'll say add. So I am just mapping the CDN profile with what? The storage account service. I'm connecting those two out here, and it's saying creating an endpoint. So let's wait for some time, and it will go ahead and create something known as an endpoint out here. Okay, any questions till here, guys? Any questions that I can take till here? So let's refresh the page out. And to create this endpoint and to make this endpoint active, right? The storage account or this particular service might take about 10 minutes. Like when you create an endpoint and make it active, it might take somewhere around 5 to 10 minutes for this endpoint to come active, okay, to become active. So what I'll do out here is that the endpoint is created. It's telling that the status is running. So I'll just click on this, and now it says, okay, fine, this is your origin endpoint, or this is the endpoint name, and you have what, a URL for this. Now this URL, right, something known as a https dot storage endpoint abc dot azure edge dot net, is representing this whole string out here. So this entire URL till here, and this is the URL of what, our storage account service. Until here it was the storage account forward slash the test container. This entire thing is being represented by https something something endpoint abc dot azure websites dot net, and I will have to manually put forward slash sample4.jpg or sample1.jpg, whatever image that I want to browse out here. So let's try this out. So I'm taking this endpoint out here. Sample, let's see, what is that? Sample hyphen 4.jpg. Just load the developer tool again. Let me try to open the server out. Now, in all likely, it might give an error because it might take some time for the server to be provisioned. But right now, yes, it did load. Now it took about 9 point, or it's still taking time. It took about 10.779 seconds out here because this is the first request that is coming from a country like India. So what this request did right now is that it went ahead into this particular storage account. So I am a user from India right now. It directly took me to the Azure storage service. It took the image and it cached into this particular edge server. Now anyone from India right now, if they go to this particular website, if they go to this particular site out here, if they go to this particular link out here, the time will not be 10.79 seconds. The time will be a far lesser amount of time out here. Like it's still showing somewhere around 6-7 seconds out here, but right now, right, the image is loaded and the time for it to load is somewhere around 6.74 seconds out here. It depends upon your internet speed and everything, and depends upon the size of the image that you're loading out here, right? So we reduce the time to almost like what, 50%. And this reduction is not only for me. Even if I go ahead and delete my browser cache, other users who are accessing this image will now enjoy this particular speed out here. Okay, this is what CDNs have actually done to the entire business out here. Okay, any questions here, guys?
Clear.
So the data, yeah, just give me one quick second. I'm sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
taking a question offline. Yeah. So the data in the edge server, will it auto refresh and etc.? No, it won't auto refresh. We will have to do manually. We'll have to go ahead and do something known as a purge. There's an option known as purge, meaning what purge does is that it will delete all the data what is there in the edge server, and then it will force the edge server to again go to the storage account and again get it back. Okay, this is an option which is not available, or the manual or the automatic purge of the option is not available, especially when you create something known as a standard Microsoft. But when you go for premium Verizon and standard Verizon and etc., right, this option is auto enabled, that they will take care of all the purging and etc. Yes, someone online had a question.
Yes, Kiran. So, the second time when we searched the image, you have used the CDN link there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, this means that if I, as one user, uses a CDN search, then the other all also will be able to use it. That means I should have the URL for CDN, right?
Correct. You'll have to have the URL for CDN.
Okay, so the other users automatically will be able to search the image through the same link.
To the same link, yes. Like generally what we do out here is that we don't give this link to the user.
Yes.
We don't give this link to the user. Rather, we map this link to something known as a custom domain, like a friendly domain, like something abc.com. Like in my case, it is google.com, right? So when you do a google.com search, google.com is just for you. But in the backend, they might have implemented something like this, which you do not, or which you rather you don't know out here, right? So this is known as custom domain mapping. We'll also see how do you map a custom domain and all that stuff.
Got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. The edge servers, isn't it? So the edge servers depends upon the frequency at what or the frequency of the requests out here. So let's say if the requests are very high from a region, the edge servers are prominent. They are very prominently maintained. So all these edge servers and etc. Right, they are managed in the backend. So we are not managing them like how many days and etc. It depends upon it purely depends upon what are the number of requests that are coming in, and how many requests are coming in, and how the data is being kind of requested for. So requests depending upon that particular request, these edge servers are maintained at a particular location. Like right now, these edge servers wouldn't have been created in a location like Australia or something like that because they did not request for it. So they do not have that particular service. So whenever I request for a service or whenever I hit this link, I'll have a makeshift server, meaning I'll have a temporary server created. All this data will be basically fed into that particular server, and then the data will be available for me. So it depends upon that way. The delivery mechanism is that way. Okay, any more questions here, guys?
So on
Just a second. So the storage capacity of an edge server, it doesn't really have a storage capacity as such. Like you can have multiple amount of data inside it. There is no proper storage capacity. There's no limit to it. Yes, someone online had a question. Sorry.
yes, sir. So on what basis the CDN is being charged?
On what basis the CDNs are what? Sorry.
It is being charged to the user.
Okay. Charge is the number of requests again. Like CDNs are going to be charged per a number of requests, but they're actually very cheaper. Like when you compare to the storage service, it's cheaper than the storage service out here. So it's the number of requests on which it is built out.
Okay.
Okay.
Kiran, as you said that if I clear my cache files in my browser, but the other
Hmm.
users will still be able to load the image through this URL, that is the CDN
Correct.
URL. So, for how many days or for how much time will the other users be able to use this temporary server,
So again,
the CDN
that
server?
depends upon the number of requests that are coming from a region. Let's say the requests are high, then the edge servers in that particular region are more permanent than temporary. So it depends upon the number of requests, and also if you let's say that I basically as a user went ahead and added multiple images into my storage account, and I want also those images to get reflected in this particular CDN, then I can come here and manually do a purge. So it completely depends upon how you are maintaining this out. So there is no proper time frame as such. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Kiran, I got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions here, guys? Any more questions? Anything that I can take? Okay. So this was the concept of something known as an Azure CDN and everything. Now there's one still issue that I'm facing out here. Let's say I'm an owner and I have like multiple owners in my particular subscription, and I don't want anyone to just go ahead and delete this resource group. Okay, because I have a lot of data and even accidental deletion can happen. Yes, definitely can happen. Human errors are inevitable. So even accidental deletions can happen out here, but can I make sure to lock this resource group somewhere? Like, is there an option to go ahead and lock this so that no one goes ahead and deletes this out, yes, that's where an option known as locks come into picture. This is known as a resource lock, meaning avoiding accidental deletion, avoiding accidental editing and all that stuff. And this option, right, to lock things out is at the resource group level A, is also at the individual resource level also. Now, if I lock my resource group, I won't be able to delete my entire resource group. If I lock a resource, I won't be able to delete that particular individual resource. So what I'll do right now is I'll lock my entire resource group out here. So how do I log this out? I'll say add this lock. Okay. And I'll say do not delete. And I'll say the lock type is a delete lock out here. And I can give notes like please don't delete. Say okay. And now I have applied something known as a lock. Now, even if I come here, or even if someone goes ahead and tries to delete this particular resource group, automatically gave you an error telling that, you know what, you cannot delete that resource group because there is a lock. If you want to delete it, firstly, please go ahead, delete that lock, and only then I'll allow you to go ahead and delete the entire resource group. And this lock, right, as and when I implemented on the resource group level, these locks are getting reflected even at the resources. It's telling parent lock resources cannot be edited here. Please go ahead and let's say edit it on, let's say, the storage, at the resource group level out here, meaning you cannot now go ahead and delete the storage account because this is locked. If you apply a lock at the resource group level, you're making sure to apply a lock for all the resources that are there inside that particular resource group. Now, there are two types out here, guys. One being a delete lock. There are two locks out here. One being a delete lock, the other being a read only lock. If I apply something known as a delete lock, no one will be able to go ahead and delete my resource group. So no one will be able to go ahead and delete this particular resource. But if I do a read only lock, I'll be able to go ahead and delete this particular resource, but I won't be able to basically go ahead and add something inside the resource group. I can delete it, not a problem, but I cannot go ahead I cannot go ahead edit something inside that particular resource group out here. Okay. These are known as what? Resource locks out here. Now, if you want to delete the resource lock, come here, and as an owner, when I implement it, only I can go ahead and delete it out. No one else can come here and delete this out. That's the biggest advantage of it. And I deleted this out, and now I can go ahead and let's say delete my entire resource group. It shouldn't give me that particular error. If I let's say delete this out, now my entire resource group is going to go ahead and get deleted. Okay. So locks again for more security purpose, meaning I don't want my resources to be deleted by someone. So I can come here and apply something known as locks out here. Okay. And this was the resource part of it, guys. Now what we are going to do is that we are going to start up with something known as PowerShell. Okay. From tomorrow's session, we are going to look at something known as a PowerShell, which I would say is a scripting language, not a programmatical language out here. Like it doesn't follow something known as OOPS concepts, object oriented programming language. It doesn't fully follow the OOPS concepts out here. So what we are going to do is that we are going to use a software, a pre-installed software in everyone's laptop, which is known as PowerShell ISE. So if I'm using a Windows 10 machine, if I just type in PowerShell ISE, it's called Integrated Service Environment. And if I just do an open, this is how it will look like. It will take a minute and it'll give you a screen something like this. This is how it's going to look like. And we are going to write code here. We are going to write something known as commands here. And why do we need this? Is till now we've been creating resources manually. Let's say I got a requirement to go ahead and create a storage account and two containers inside it. I went ahead and created it out. Let's say my client now wants to go ahead and create not two but 200 storage accounts. with 200 containers inside each and every storage account. Now, how much time will it take to for me to go ahead and create all these things out? Like one storage account inside which two containers, it's taking me somewhere around 5 minutes. Now, one storage account with 20 containers inside it will take somewhere around 20 minutes for me. Now, 100 storage accounts with 20 containers in each is going to take me a lot of time, right? In order to make sure to automate all those things out, I'm using a language known as PowerShell in order to help me create all these things out. So what we are going to start with is that the very basics of PowerShell. Like what is PowerShell? Like what is something known as Windows PowerShell and how do you use PowerShell to interact with Azure? This is something that we are going to start with from tomorrow. I don't want to like overburden things out today. So today's concepts are CDNs and resource logs. Please do revise it. Please go through the documentations of it. Okay, whenever you have a question, please go through the documentations of it. And if you still do not follow documentations out here, please feel free to go ahead and ping me out. I'll help you out. Okay. Any questions still here, guys? Anything that I can take for today? You can do resource log at the subscription level. Good question. Let's see. I don't think you'll have a log option at the subscription level. It's at the resource group level that you do have out here. Let's see if I can lock this out. You have a resource log, but you'll have to specify which resource that you're adding this for. So you can do a resource log out here as well. Like you have logs at different levels, like the same way you have IAM at different levels. So you can do a log here also. So if you do a log here, every resource group that you create, right, will automatically inherit this log. So every resource, let's say I create a new resource group, that resource group would automatically come with a log. So you can do a log at the subscription also. Correct. Correct. You can do that, or I can write a PowerShell script. I can write a PowerShell script and I can forget it. It'll go ahead and log things out. Okay, that's where program comes into picture. Any further questions here, guys? Mhm. Two different websites or two different storage accounts. Let's say two different storage accounts. Yes, he needs to create two different CDN profiles. Or the other option is that he can create multiple endpoints within the same CDN profile. So one endpoint can point to storage account A, the other endpoint can point to B. You'll have two different URLs for that. So you can do that. If you log the resource, I mean, if you log that particular profile, you'll only be able to delete it provided you delete the log first. Firstly, you'll have to delete the log just like the way I did, and then you'll basically go ahead and let's say delete the entire resource group. Okay, so good question is that who now what happens is that in the logs concept, right? If you are the administrator, there is something known as a global administrator. They can go ahead and unlock that out. They can do that. That permission is there for a global administrator. Okay. Any more questions here, guys? Can you add multiple logs? Yes, you can add multiple logs. Yes. Any more questions that I can take for today's session, guys? Anyone online? Anything offline? Now, from tomorrow, there's at least going to be like 4 or 5 days where we are just going to see what are the basics of PowerShell and how do you write a script and etc. And I'll start giving you assignments and what to write and what to do and etc. on PowerShell. And please make sure that you do practice PowerShell, guys, because I know it is tough. It'll be a bit, for especially someone who's coming from a non-programming background, it's going to be a bit like Greek and Latin initially. But please try it out because as a DevOps engineer, this would be your bread and butter. Like PowerShell, ARM templates is going to be your bread and butter out there. Okay. So please make sure to do a regular practice. And I'm here to help anytime. So if you run into any issues, I'll tell you what are the issues and etc. We'll discuss about that. Okay.
Hi Kiran,
Okay, guys.
I am Bharat.
Yep. Hi, Bharat.
Is there any backup tool when we deleted resource group mistakenly?
Mm-hmm. So you mean backup?
Backup.
No, there is no backup. Resource group deletions are undoable. Like it's you cannot undo it. So you have to be very careful while deleting something out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions here, guys? Okay, if there are no further questions, then we're good to close session today. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. We'll meet tomorrow.